Welcome to our lecture. Today we're going to explore the foundational concepts of regulatory affairs and the Electronic Common Technical Document, or eCTD. This lecture is designed to give you a comprehensive understanding of how regulatory submissions work in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry. Whether you plan to work in regulatory affairs, clinical development, quality, or any other area of drug development, understanding the eCTD is essential. By the end of today's session, you'll understand why regulation exists, how the eCTD came to be, and how it fits into the broader landscape of drug development. Let's begin our journey into the world of regulatory science. Here's our agenda for today. We have a lot of ground to cover, but I've structured it to build logically from foundational concepts to practical applications. We'll start with the philosophical foundations, understanding that regulation is fundamentally a human endeavor with moral and ethical components. Then we'll look at a pivotal case study, the thalidomide disaster, which shaped modern drug regulation. From there, we'll explore how the International Conference on Harmonization emerged to address the need for global alignment in drug approval processes. This sets the stage for understanding the eCTD itself, its history, structure, and role across the drug development lifecycle. Let's start with the fundamental question: what exactly is the eCTD? The eCTD stands for Electronic Common Technical Document. I want to emphasize several key points here. First, it's a collection of documents, not one single document. Think of it as a very organized filing cabinet with specific drawers and folders. Second, the eCTD is a format or roadmap. It tells you where to put different types of information, but it doesn't specify exactly what information is required. That's determined by regulations and guidance documents. Third, its primary purpose is harmonization. Before the eCTD, pharmaceutical companies had to prepare completely different submission packages for each country. The eCTD allows them to prepare one core package that works across multiple regulatory agencies. The eCTD contains quality information like manufacturing data, non-clinical data from animal studies, clinical data from human trials, and administrative information specific to each region. Now let's discuss why mastering the eCTD is so important for your career. First, it's the most harmonized regulatory submission format in the world. Most regulatory submissions globally, even if not fully eCTD format, contain elements based on this structure. Learning eCTD gives you a broadly applicable skill set. Second, and this is absolutely critical, all investigational new drug applications submitted to the FDA must be in eCTD format. If you want to conduct clinical trials in the United States, you must know eCTD. There's no alternative. Look at these dates: May 2017 for NDAs, ANDAs, and BLAs. May 2018 for commercial INDs and master files. These aren't recommendations, they're requirements. Submissions that don't use eCTD format are simply not accepted. This means whether you're working in a large pharmaceutical company or a small biotech startup, understanding eCTD is not optional, it's essential for anyone involved in drug development. Before we dive deeper into the technical aspects of eCTD, I want to take a step back and discuss the philosophical foundations of regulation. This quote from Jim Ellis captures something profound: regulation is fundamentally a human phenomenon. It's not just about rules and paperwork. At its core, drug regulation exists because society has decided that protecting public health is important enough to require oversight. Regulation involves moral and ethical components. We're asking questions like, how much risk is acceptable? Who decides what's safe enough? How do we balance access to potentially life-saving treatments with protecting people from harm? The way different societies answer these questions varies enormously. Look at examples beyond pharmaceuticals: carbon pricing regulations, cryptocurrency oversight, COVID-19 responses. Each reflects different cultural values and priorities. This human element is what makes regulatory affairs both challenging and meaningful. We're not just checking boxes or participating in decisions that affect public health. This slide shows the major regulatory agencies around the world. You'll notice that while there are many agencies, they don't all have identical requirements. The FDA in the United States, EMA in Europe, PMDA in Japan, and CFDA in China are among the largest and most influential. But there are many others: Health Canada, Swissmedic in Switzerland, TGA in Australia, HSA in Singapore. Each agency has its own requirements, timelines, and processes. This is precisely why harmonization efforts like the eCTD are so valuable. Without a common format, pharmaceutical companies would need to create completely different submission packages for each market. The eCTD doesn't eliminate all differences. Module 1, as we'll see, remains region-specific. But Modules 2 through 5 are common across regions, which significantly reduces the work required for global submissions. Notice the PIC/S designations on this map, the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme, which shows another layer of harmonization efforts focused on GMP standards. The thalidomide tragedy is a defining moment in the history of drug regulation. Understanding this case helps explain why we have the regulatory systems we do today. In the early 1960s, thalidomide was approved and marketed in several European countries as a sedative and treatment for morning sickness. It caused severe birth defects in thousands of children, a disaster that could have been prevented with more rigorous safety testing. Critically, the FDA had not approved thalidomide in the United States. An FDA reviewer, Dr. Francis Kelsey, had concerns about the drug's safety data and refused to approve it despite pressure from the manufacturer. This decision protected American patients. The response to this tragedy differed between regions. In Europe, authorities tightened post-market surveillance. More drugs were approved, but more were also withdrawn from the market when problems emerged. The FDA took a different approach, implementing the 1962 Kefauver-Harris Amendment, which significantly strengthened pre-market safety and efficacy requirements. The FDA's rigorous approach established it as a global gold standard for drug approvals, but it also led to longer approval times and, eventually, criticism about the so-called drug lag. This timeline shows how we got from the thalidomide disaster to the creation of ICH and ultimately the eCTD. The 1960s were defined by the thalidomide response: stronger regulations, more safety requirements. By the 1970s, there was growing criticism that FDA's rigorous approach was preventing Americans from accessing drugs available elsewhere. The 1980s brought the AIDS crisis, which dramatically changed the conversation. Patients were dying of a disease with no effective treatments, and the traditional regulatory timeline seemed unconscionable. This created pressure for reform and opened FDA to change. Throughout this period, FDA and European agencies gradually became more aligned in their approaches. At the same time, pharmaceutical companies operating globally were frustrated by redundant requirements. Why should they have to conduct the same studies multiple times or prepare completely different dossiers for each country? In 1990, these forces converged in Brussels, where representatives from the EU, US, and Japan met to establish what we now know as ICH. This was a watershed moment that set the stage for global harmonization of drug approval processes. The International Council for Harmonization, originally called the International Conference on Harmonization, is the organization that developed the eCTD. ICH was founded in 1990 by regulatory authorities from Europe, Japan, and the United States, along with industry organizations. In 2015, it reformed and renamed itself to become a more truly global organization, with expanded membership and observer status for many additional countries. ICH develops guidelines in 4 main categories, each identified by a letter. Q guidelines address quality, manufacturing, stability, specifications. S guidelines cover safety, non-clinical studies in toxicology. E guidelines focus on efficacy, clinical trial design and reporting. M guidelines are multidisciplinary, this is where the CTD and eCTD specifications live. An important point, ICH has no direct authority. Its guidelines are recommendations that must be implemented by each regulatory authority. This means there can be regional variations in how guidelines are applied, and local guidance documents often supplement ICH guidelines. This slide summarizes ICH's objectives in creating the eCTD. Understanding these objectives helps you understand why the format is structured the way it is. The scope is clear, a harmonized format for registration applications that's acceptable across regions. Critically, the eCTD does not define content, it doesn't specify what studies are required or what data must be collected. Those decisions are made by regulations and guidance documents. The eCTD just provides a standardized way to organize and present whatever information is required. For industry, the benefits include reduced time and resources to compile applications, since the same documents can be used across regions with minimal modification. It also eases electronic submission preparation. For regulatory authorities, the benefits include more efficient reviews since reviewers know exactly where to find information, improved communication with applicants, and simplified information exchange between regulators. The key benefit is efficiency. A common format eliminates the need to generate and compile completely different registration dossiers for each region. This is a significant time and cost savings for companies, which ultimately benefits patients by potentially speeding access to new medicines. Let's look at where eCTD stands globally today. This map shows the current status of eCTD implementation worldwide. In green, you see countries that are actively accepting eCTD submissions. This includes the major markets: United States, European Union, Japan, Canada, Australia, Switzerland, and others. These are the markets where eCTD is either mandatory or strongly preferred. In blue are countries that are implementing eCTD, working toward acceptance but not yet fully there. This includes large markets like China and Brazil, as well as smaller markets throughout Africa and Asia. In gray are countries still primarily using paper-based submissions. These tend to be smaller markets or developing nations where the infrastructure for electronic submissions isn't yet in place. Notice the key milestones. CTD became official in July 2003, eCTD specifications were adopted in November 2003, and the electronic format became mandatory starting in 2014 and 2017 in different regions. Also note that regional variations exist. ASEAN countries use a modified ASEAN CTD, East African countries use the EAC CTD, and Pan American countries use PANDER CTD. These are based on the ICH CTD but adapted for regional needs. This slide clarifies the nomenclature around eCTD submissions, which can be confusing because different regions use different terms. In the United States, we have NDA for new drug application, for small molecule drugs, and BLA for biologics license application, for biological products. In Europe, the equivalent is MAA or marketing authorization application. In Canada, it's NDS or new drug submission. In Japan, it's JNDA or Japanese new drug application. The key point is that all of these submission types use the eCTD format. The terminology varies, but the underlying structure is harmonized. A marketing authorization, whether called an NDA, MAA, NDS, or JNDA, is required to place a medicinal product on the market in any country. These are the culmination of years of drug development work. The IND or investigational new drug application is also submitted in eCTD format in the US. This is the submission that allows you to begin clinical trials. Without an approved IND, you cannot conduct clinical studies on a new drug in humans in the United States. The eCTD is often visualized as a triangle or pyramid, which reflects its hierarchical structure. Let me walk you through this. At the top is Module 1, shown in red because it's not part of the harmonized CTD. Module 1 contains regional administrative information, things like cover letters, application forms, and proposed labeling that are specific to each country or region. You need different Module 1 content for FDA versus EMA versus PMDA. Module 2, shown in purple, contains summaries and overviews. This is where reviewers get the big picture before diving into details. It includes the quality overall summary, non-clinical overview, clinical overview, and various written and tabulated summaries. At the bottom are Modules 3, 4, and 5, which contain the detailed data. Module 3 is Quality or CMC, Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls. Module 4 is Non-Clinical Animal Pharmacology and Toxicology Studies. Module 5 is Clinical, all the human clinical trial data. The key principle here is increasing detail as you move down the triangle. At the top, you have high-level summaries. At the bottom, you have raw data and detailed study reports. This structure allows reviewers to understand the big picture quickly and then drill down into details as needed. Let's look at the modules in more detail and understand the ICH guidance documents that govern each one. Module 1 contains regional administrative information, cover letters, forms, proposed labeling, risk management plans. This varies by region. Module 2 contains summaries, the quality overall summary, QoS, non-clinical overview and summaries, clinical overview and summary. This is the module regulators often read first to understand the overall story. Module 3 is all about quality drug substance information, drug product information, manufacturing processes, specifications, stability data. This is the CMC section. Module 4 contains non-clinical study reports, pharmacology studies, pharmacokinetic studies, toxicology studies. These are the animal studies that support safety. Module 5 contains clinical study reports, all the human trial data including efficacy and safety results. For main ICH guidelines govern the CTD, M4 for overall organization, M4Q for quality content, M4S for safety content, and M4E for efficacy content. You'll become very familiar with these documents as you work in regulatory affairs. The three main aspects of harmonization: quality, safety, and efficacy form the foundation of the entire system. A common misconception is that regulatory affairs is only about getting drugs approved. In reality, regulatory involvement spans the entire product lifecycle. During the development phase, regulatory professionals provide advice on development plans, arrange for scientific advice meetings with authorities, prepare clinical trial applications, and develop regulatory strategy. They ensure legislative requirements are met and help guide development studies. During the approval phase, regulatory teams manage the application procedure, prepare for authority meetings and hearings, handle electronic submissions, and work on labeling. They check progress of evaluation, prepare for and respond to questions, and negotiate approval terms. During the post-approval phase, work continues with lifecycle management, submission of variations and amendments, post-approval commitments, renewals, and pharmacovigilance. If the company wants to add new indications or new formulations, regulatory input is needed for those development plans too. The key insight is that regulatory review is iterative and spans the entire clinical development path. It's not a one-time hurdle at the end, it's an ongoing process of engagement with authorities throughout a product's life. This slide compares regulatory interactions between FDA and EMA throughout the drug development lifecycle. Both agencies offer opportunities for meetings and scientific advice at various stages. In the US, you have pre-IND meetings before filing an IND, end of Phase 1 and end of Phase 2 meetings to discuss development plans, special protocol assessments for pivotal trials, and pre-NDA meetings before filing the marketing application. In Europe, The pathway includes national regulatory interactions, scientific advice, protocol assistance for orphan drugs, and pre-submission meetings. The bottom timeline shows the overall development stages from preclinical through post-authorization. Notice that regulatory touchpoints occur throughout, not just at the approval stage. Strategic engagement with regulators early and often improves outcomes. These meetings allow companies to get feedback on their development plans, understand what regulators are looking for, and address concerns before they become problems in the approval process. The standard meetings shown in blue are routine interactions. The advisory meetings shown in gold are opportunities for more in-depth guidance from regulators. Let's discuss some famous eCTD submission types that you'll encounter frequently. The IND or Investigational New Drug application is what allows you to begin clinical trials in the US. You cannot administer an investigational drug to humans without an approved IND. The NDA is the new drug application. This is what you submit to FDA when you want marketing approval for a small molecule drug. For biologics, you submit a BLA or Biologics License application. The MAA or Marketing Authorization application is the European equivalent for marketing approval. A particularly timely example is the Emergency Use Authorization or EUA. The Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines were authorized through EUA submissions. Importantly, EUAs are submitted in eCTD format to Section 1.19 of an active IND. You must have an active IND to request an EUA. Common documents submitted as part of the eCTD include clinical study protocols and reports, non-clinical study reports, regulatory meeting briefing packages, and regulatory correspondence. All of these fit into the modular eCTD structure we discussed earlier. Regulatory affairs encompasses many different roles and specializations. Let me walk you through some of the key career paths. Project management roles coordinate cross-functional teams and keep programs on track. Submission management focuses specifically on compiling and submitting dossiers, ensuring everything is in the right place in the right format. CMC specialists focus on quality and manufacturing aspects, Module 3 of the eCTD. They need deep knowledge of drug substance and drug product requirements. Non-clinical and clinical specialists focus on safety and efficacy data, Modules 4 and 5 respectively. These roles require understanding of study design and data interpretation. Labeling experts work on product information and claims, ensuring that labels accurately reflect the approved use and include appropriate safety information. Regulatory intelligence professionals track regulatory changes globally and help companies understand how new regulations or guidance might affect their products. There's also an important distinction between global and local regulatory affairs. Global teams develop strategy and prepare core dossiers that can be used across regions. Local teams adapt submissions for regional requirements and manage country-specific interactions with authorities. Many professionals work in one area but benefit from understanding both. Let me share some basic principles about how the eCTD works in practice. First, eCTD submissions are large. A complete NDA might include hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. And the dossier grows over time. As you conduct more studies and gather more data, you submit amendments that add to the dossier. This requires multidisciplinary authorship. You need input from clinical scientists, non-clinical experts, quality/CMC professionals, medical writers, and regulatory specialists. No single person creates an entire eCTD. The technical structure involves sequences. Each submission is numbered 0000, 0001, 0002. There's an XML backbone that provides navigation and metadata, with PDF files containing the actual content. These PDFs are called leaf files. Electronic submission has significant benefits: faster transmission than shipping boxes of paper, searchable content, version tracking, and reduced physical storage needs. The critical reminder here is that paper submissions are no longer accepted. If you're working in drug development in the US, you will be working with eCTD. There is no alternative. Specialized publishing software like Rosetta is used to compile and validate submissions. These tools ensure the submission meets technical requirements and display the folder structure for easy navigation. Let's wrap up with our key takeaways from today's session. First, drug regulation is fundamentally a human phenomenon. It exists because society has decided to protect public health through oversight of medicines. This isn't just about rules, it's about values and ethics. Second, the thalidomide disaster of the 1960s was a turning point. It drove regulatory reform, established FDA as a gold standard, and ultimately led to international harmonization efforts. Understanding this history helps you appreciate why regulations exist. Third, ICH was founded in 1990 and has grown into a global organization. Its guidelines on quality, safety, and efficacy form the foundation of modern drug regulation. The eCTD is one of many ICH standards. Fourth, the eCTD is the mandatory electronic format for regulatory submissions. First developed in 2002 and made mandatory in 2017, it provides a harmonized structure for organizing the massive amount of information required for drug approval. As we continue through this course, we'll dive deeper into each eCTD module and develop practical regulatory writing skills. The foundation we've built today will support everything else we learn. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to our continued exploration of regulatory affairs.